Well, good afternoon, you fine folks. It's nice to see everyone. I'm Sherry Saville. I'm with Grandmother's Voice as well as with Halton Catholic District School Board as the Indigenous Education Lead. And we're so honored and thrilled to have some wonderful folks with us who know an awful lot about environment, about food sovereignty, about the 3 F's, I believe is what you have called it. And for those of you that are just tuning in, we'll let Kevin as well as Andrea and Wendy talk about what those 3 F's are. We're so thrilled that you're here. And then we have Andrea Rowe from Halton Environment Network, Wendy Roberts from Sustainable Milton, and Kevin Hamilton that's coming from us from McQuestran Farms. And so it's been an awesome journey that I know that my partner Jody Harbour has done a wonderful job as far as bringing us all together. That's one of the things that she is just, amongst other things, but one of the wonderful things that she's so great at doing is networking. So I'm just going to hand it over to you, Andrea, because you have been being part of this collective for the last, not only a couple of years, but for the last couple of weeks that we've been back on live with Grandmother's Voice. So welcome, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Sherry. It is lovely to be back and continuing our conversation from last week. So again, my name is Andrea Rowe. I am the Director of Sustainable Environments with Halton Environmental Network. And my team and I help teach people how to grow food as sustainably as possible. So this is a topic very near and dear to my heart. And Sherry, I think it's actually the 3 S's. So food security, food sovereignty, I can't remember what the 3rd S is at the moment, but they actually all do start with F as well. So we can both be right on this one. But just for those who have been following some of our social media posts as well, we're trying to hone in on food security and food sovereignty. And continuing this conversation, I would like to also welcome Wendy, and she's going to introduce herself and the organization and how she came to be part of this conversation. So thank you for joining us, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you all. So I'm a member of the board of Sustainable Milton. We're a fairly new organization. And our goal really is to help make the town of Milton more sustainable. And one of the ways, or many of the ways we're working on doing that, is to participate in helping other organizations with their various gardens. We've got with Grandmother's Voice, we were delighted to participate in the creation or the building of the garden there. And also we work closely with the Italian Cultural Center of Milton, where we have a pollinator garden, which we keep expanding every year. And very exciting, last year, with help from Landscape Ontario, we were able to put in 12 or 14 garden beds. And we have another piece of land that we're not going to use beds for, but that we want to plant, and those will be for vegetables. So I am very new. I dabble in my own garden, trying to grow some vegetables. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes not. So I really have a lot of questions about how we can do better. We really, as I mentioned last week, really want to get dirty and in the dirt and play. And grow food. Thank you very much for having us. I guess to Kevin.
Hi. My name is Kevin Hamilton, and I am currently working at McQuestran Urban Farm in Hamilton. We're at Woodward and Melvin, kind of the east end, just close to the Red Hill Expressway. So I'm the lead farmer down here, and it's in an urban setting. We're growing on around 2 acres of land and close to an acre of food. And I've been farming organically for 20 years and love sharing my knowledge with everyone. I say this not as a brag, but just as a background that I've ridden my bicycle across Canada once and a half, across Australia, and my brother and I went from Portugal to Vietnam. So I was visiting farms the whole way, raising money for various environmental organizations and stuff to hopefully clean up this one-horse planet that we're on, and do things as sustainably as we can. Oh, and the last S was survival.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been at that for 20 years, and I've seen all kinds of farms all over the world. So I kind of my quest was looking for how to grow best practice without the aid of petrochemical fertilizers and that reliance, which seems like we get closer and closer to every year. So, and to Wendy's point about playing and growing your own garden and failing and that kind of thing, I mean, year after year, you always have a different season, and that's how we grow and learn, is by trial and error. So yeah, I still have crop failure here and there, whether it's a cucumber patch or whatever, depending on the year. So yeah, it's a beautiful learning curve.
Wonderful to have so many different perspectives and levels of experience to aid in making this a fulsome conversation. So I know, Wendy, you had some questions around what to get starting now. So maybe you want to talk about what it is that you're looking to grow in your garden, and Kevin can then give us an overview of what to do and when, because that's also an important part of the conversation, is timing.
Yes, yes. So with the vegetables, I think maybe I'll focus on that right now. With the gardens at the Italian Cultural Center, we're hoping to grow vegetables that we could distribute in the community to those in need. And we also want to save some of it because we're hoping to run some cooking lessons. I won't be teaching, but I'll be hopefully participating. And I think Andrea had mentioned earlier that it's probably a good idea to start with vegetables that are common and well known. And I made the mistake last year with native plants getting overly exuberant and planting way too many way too soon. And then trying to figure out how to keep them healthy and alive until I could get them in the ground. So I guess it's the kind of vegetables that that would last and we would be able to transport nearby within Milton. How's that as a starter?
That's a good starting point. So what are some easily recognizable things that we should be starting seedlings for now, Kevin? What's the opening gambit, I guess, for
the opening moves? Who's singing the anthem? We had right now we're just starting like leeks. I used to start onions and leeks and celery root. Those are the three things because those are just staple foods I grow, and even celery. Those four in late February, early March. If you're doing artichokes, which is kind of a tropical one, but it's a good one to start very early too because it's a long season one, you could start those as well. The only one that I don't do that with anymore is onions. I've noticed William Dam, that's a seed house in Flamborough. They were recommending from their trials to start them closer in April, and they were getting the same results as far as onions. So you could start them early if you're doing it, or you could start them a little bit later. But those are the ones that I do. So leeks, onions, celery root, celery, artichokes. Some of if you're doing herbs and things like that, some of those woodier perennials, you can start early too. And if you look on your seed packets, most likely it will say start 8 to 12 weeks before your last frost. So.
Right. So first piece of research, know your last frost dates. Grab a calendar, start counting backwards from there, and figure out what needs to be started 10 to 12 weeks before your last frost, 8 to 10 weeks, and then 6 to 8 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. Those are the general rules. They give you 2 weeks of kind of leeway. So if you want to also stagger some plantings, you don't want them all started at the same time for whatever reason. I only have one large grow light, so sometimes I'll stagger seed starting as well so that I can rotate things through.
And then what about, is there something that we could be doing now to, well, when the frost is almost gone, to prepare the beds themselves so that they'll be very inviting to our little plants.
Yeah, so traditionally, like when I was still a little wetter behind the ears, I was just doing some tilling. So I mean, usually I would prep things in the fall. I would throw some compost down and then till with a rototiller to break up if you have in your backyard, if you just have sod. I would break that up lightly, and then if you're going to dig a raised bed, again, you want to know where your low spots are in your garden where you're putting stuff. So you might want to do the raised beds. Otherwise, it's just more effort. You can just grow right in the ground. But if you have drainage problems in that, then I would make my raised beds. And I would do that in the fall. And then that gives the land a bit of time to digest. Now with new knowledge from the Soil Food Web folks, I'm taking a soil microbiology and biochemistry course in this. The easiest thing to do is I avoided the black plastic mulch because I didn't like throwaway plastic and that kind of stuff. But if you have lots of straw or hay, or the black plastic mulch is great in that I just lay it down where I'm going to make my garden. And then in 2 to 3 weeks, it takes away all the photosynthesis. So then everything underneath there is going to go yellow. And I've done experiments where I've laid that down for 2-3 weeks, and then I've driven the tractor over or my tiller, and it just works it up nicely. And then right beside where it wasn't, and the grass has still been mowed and is short, the tractor discs or the rototiller or whatever does not grab in and turn that as easy. So when you put a black plastic tarp down, it really breaks down some of the cellular structure in the plants and the lignins in that, so that it does break up and can be digested easier too. So if I was going to start my this garden this year and get going for, say, the May 2-4 weekend, which is traditionally last frost in around here, I'm in Hamilton, so that's more here. Usually June 1st is go time for most farmers. I would say like south of Barrie kind of thing, or in and around that area. I would just throw that black plastic mulch down now. And then if you could spread some compost too, but if I throw that down now, then I'll be ready to break ground, say beginning of May. And usually I want to anywhere between 4 weeks, at the very earliest 2 weeks, so that the land can digest some of the green matter and stuff when you're incorporating things. So yeah, it's kind of the long short of it. So if you didn't do it last fall, you can cover things now. Protecting your soil is always great with mulch, whether it's copious amounts like 5 or 6 inches of wood chips, or a big mat of hay or straw. Hay, there's more seeds in it, straw, but that really protects the soil and keeps the microbial life alive in there.
And again, Wendy, it really depends on the scale that you're talking about. So, the new ground level garden beds that Kevin is referring to, where you want to just smother existing matter and leave yourself a nice fresh patch of grass so that you're not competing, or of ground rather, so you're not competing with the grass and the weeds and other things that are there. But your raised beds, just add that organic matter in. The compost will act as your fertilizer and give you some nice soil structure as well. So Kevin, why don't we move the conversation to the next step, which is actually the seed starting. So we'll work with you, Wendy, to make sure your garden beds are ready, but then you've got to have something to go in that ground. So Kevin's got some examples of different sizes of trays and different materials.
Yeah, so I'll just go back a little bit. Last week I had a piece of tissue paper on a plate, and I did a germination test because I had some old seeds. So I'll just show you. I took a normal everyday average plate, and then I put this brown paper towel on it, like your average, and I stuck my seeds on the plate. And here I'm just gonna tilt my camera down. So there are my seeds.
Amazing.
So I put 25 on that plate, and then I put water. I just covered it like that, put water over top of the brown paper, and then waited. It was in a warm space, kind of in my basement, but it's a live-in basement. And then, so yeah, there are my seeds that sprouted up. From that 25.
What seeds did you start there?
This was purple cauliflower.
Okay.
So
now you know your germination rate and you know the viability of your seeds.
Exactly. So if I want to count this, just by looking at it, it's a good 80% still. And this was 2-year-old seed. So, which is why, anything more than 2 years, I would probably do a germination test. That way I know if I have to order more seed or just how many seeds to put per cell. Because if it's bad germination, like 25%, I'm going to put 4 or 5 in. And if it's 80%, then I might just put 1 or 2 in. So yeah, that was a pretty successful. And then if you see how good my camera is here, I'll take a little seedling, but you can see the seed.
Yep.
Right
Hold
there.
Nice and still as the camera focuses. Good. So we've got the seed. Yep.
And then right here at the top, you can see that's where the leaf is coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So everything underneath that is your root. And there'll be little hairs on the root. That's your hypha. That's the new root growth. And without getting into it too much, that's where all the bacteria and the fungus is going to form and start making nutrients available. If you look at it under a microscope, you'll see that. And just one other quick thing too, before we get too ahead of ourselves. This is a book from Lee Valley. I highly recommend getting this. I think it was $40. It might be a little more now. Gardner's Journal. Inside here has tons of information for everything gardening you'd need. It has harvesting record, planting records, bits on composting, garden layout, like a graph kind of thing, so you can lay your garden out. And it has up to 10 years. So it'll have 10 pages of garden layout. It has your seed inventory on there. It has a place for you to put your receipts, log when you do perennials. But the coolest part about it is that it's got your
journal
calendar. Yeah, your journal. So there's January 17th. So there's nothing in there because I'm not doing anything on January 17th. But getting closer into the season, and we sporadically use this one. This is kind of a new one, but it's got 10 years. So on one side, you put your temperatures in that, and then you got 10 years. So here's like, say, 2021, 2022, 2023. And then you can look back historically at one you recorded the temperatures in, and you just make notes. So I seeded this, I pruned these trees, and then you can see where you're at year to year and where the temperatures and stuff were at. So you can kind of strategize a little better.
Yep. The best way to learn from the past mistakes is to understand what happened, or to replicate success. You have to remember what you did. And I don't know about most of you, but I can barely remember what I ate for breakfast that morning or dinner the night before, let alone what I planted on what date. So yes, good record keeping, whether it's in a book, old school like that, or one of the new online platforms. We happen to use a program called GrowVeg. It offers very similar features, just in a digital platform, because we're sharing information with a lot of different gardeners across the region. So just find one that works for you and make sure you keep notes. Highly recommended.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that, Kevin, you recommended that book from Lee Valley. And I've started growing my garden, and I bought that about 5 years ago. And it really does keep everything all in order. And especially in the wintertime too, when I'm getting used to just starting thinking about my garden, I can grab a cup of tea and then just start looking through of what I'd done the year before. Mm-hmm. So I'm so glad that she showed everybody that awesome book. And there's something, I think it's I don't know, I'm a little older than all of you guys. And so I think it's a little bit to do with the book. I love the big book, and then going through and seeing all the different things, and then just kind of homesteading in that kind of sense. And that's what it really feels like when I have that book on my lap.
Yeah, you reminisce about all of the delicious things that you grew and ate and enjoyed and maybe shared, and what you want to grow more of that year. All right, you're all set up there, Kevin. Back to you.
More or less. I'm kind of a fly by seat of pants type of person, so this was all like an hour before I was getting all my stuff together. This is Pro Mix. You can get this at most of any of the Lowe's or the larger gardening places. It's not certified organic. It says organic on there, and this little let me show you a little closer. This logo here, OMRI listed. Generally, this is equivalent to the organic standards. But if anybody was actually organic farming or looking to get certified, you have to talk to your certifier. A little bit more information than most people need, but just thought I would throw that out there. So it advertises 20% bigger plants, guaranteed. I'd like to see the guarantee policy on that, but and feeds for 3 months. So this is premium organic vegetable and herb mix. Now, you can start your seedlings in this. There's another medium, which is called seeding mix. So because it has some fertility in it, sometimes that inhibits germination. So if it has a little bit too much nitrogen, then sometimes your seeds just won't germinate. If it says 90% on the brand new pack that you got, I don't do germination tests on things I just buy. I just trust what's on the packet. And most of the packets will say on the back your germination rates for that season. So if I do see that there's not good germination in some things, then I might just get it's a seeding mix. So generally it'll just be peats and a little bit of tilth to it. And then once my seedlings get about this big or just up, then I will move it out of there and put it into something like this. So that's a good tip. And I generally will do some kind of a little bit of fertility too when things are going.
So here's a question that some people may be thinking but haven't typed into the chat yet. What's wrong with seeds starting right in your garden soil? Bring in some soil from outside and use that to start our seeds.
Yep, you can. Sometimes if it's soil, you know how you get like that crust on top? With the peat or the coconut fiber is another material they use. It's just lighter and fluffier, so it allows for that pop to happen. When you're doing it indoors, when you're watering consistently with your watering cans, and sometimes it just gets a little crust on top and then it won't pop through. That's why the seeding in the potting mix is a little better. Now, if you have lots of seed, then yeah, you can go a little heavier and hope for that. Mm-hmm. So,
and then there's the practical consideration that our ground is still frozen outside. So good luck, scraping off some to start your seeds in.
Yeah. Unless you have a blowtorch or a pickaxe. I have pickaxed many a compost pile early in the season to bring into the greenhouse to warm up. It's metabolic, but it's good for spring training. The other thing, so here, I'll bring this over here. So here is, I'm going to drop that bag down. Here's a normal container, like just a tote. And that's got my soil mix in there. Now, if you get stuff that doesn't have a soil mix that doesn't have any fertility in it, I will use a tote like that, and then I'll buy some vermicompost. Vermicompost is like the best stuff you can get. It's 50% humus, which is it's living, and that's what's going to retain moisture, as well as the humic acids can really make nutrients available, fulvic and humic acids. And so worm castings are probably the best vermicompost. Otherwise, there should be charts and things you can get online. For say cow manure, I will do 3 potting mix to 1 cow manure. Chicken is more like 6 or 7 potting mix to 1, whatever you're measuring with, if it's cups or shovels or whatever, 6 to 1, because there's lots of nitrogen in that and it packs a punch. So there's different fertility manures and compost that will have more punch to it in the nitrogen and potassium and phosphorus sense. And I generally try to mellow it out with that. So that's another thing you can do. You can get sand and some garden soil and some peat. You can get all those separate parent materials and mix them together if you wanted to make your own thing. Generally, it's just easy to get it all in one go in a bag.
And just a reminder from last week's conversation too, always use aged manure. If you're going to add it into your materials, make sure it's aged, not fresh manure straight out of the barn, because you will unfortunately harm your plants more than you feed them and help them. And seedlings even more so.
Absolutely. So the difference between manure and compost, having 20 years of organic gardening and having certifiers come by to check my place, if you use the M word, they get very uppity and excited because that's got pathogens and, it's poop. So compost definitively is a pile of refuse, whether it's vegetables or poop, manure of some sort. You got to wait till that inside of that pile gets up to 65 Celsius. You flip it. You wait till for 3 days, and then you wait till it gets to 65 in the middle again for 3 days. You flip it, and then you let it happen a third time and flip it, and then it's compost. When you have recorded temperatures, that temperature will kill all the pathogens, and you're just making the outside of the pile get to the middle so it can enjoy that temperature and kill the microbes or the pathogens, the bad stuff. So
making sure your batch is thoroughly cooked.
Yeah, and if there's ever a question that it might not be, if it just smells, right? Like usually the old proboscis and smell, and if it smells like it might still not be done, then I would suggest not using it, especially on greens. You can work it into your garden. If you're doing something like squash, that's 100 days. You could work it in the garden. The general rule is 100 days in the soil will get rid of those pathogens. So you definitely do not want to be using it in greens. That's when we have most of those E. coli and salmonella outbreaks, or because of nutrient management where people may have used fresh manure. So the other thing too, this is it's a brand. I'm not promoting any one brand, but it's called Mike, and this is full of mycorrhizal fungi. 80% of the plants on the planet have a symbiotic relationship with fungus, where the mycorrhizal or the endo and ectomycorrhizal, which means it grows on the root or grows beside the root. Like the fungus, we know from peer-reviewed science that the only way that we get nutrients from the earth into our plants is through fungal activity in the soil. It breaks it down, chelates it, extrudes it, and leaves the nutrients behind in a form readily available for the plants to uptake. So there's lots of different companies like this, and if you really want to be a nerd, you can look on the back, and if your eyes are good, you can read that fine print. I need a magnifying glass or two, maybe a microscope. But there's different fungal components to these, which will release and make other things available. Essentially, what it is,
definitely for the more advanced grower in the group.
Yes, if you really want to nerd out like that. But I'm like, I can't say enough. This is like 30% bigger plant. When you start your seedlings with this inoculant and you get that fungus right away, you get a much bigger root system. Mm-hmm. And when it gets into the ground too, if there's any dead roots or anything, if there's trees around that have roots that are going underneath, that fungus and stuff, it'll eventually grow and it'll attach. And once it's attached, you have like all this symbiotic, all this sharing of nutrients. So in the biggest organism in the world is 3,000 acres. Long story short, it moves nutrients through the forest, through these fungal networks. It's like the internet, 5 computers that connected simultaneously, and then more computers started to connect, and it made this spider web. That's exactly how the fungus works. It's this interconnected, woven, hollow tubes, when you look at it through a microscope, that share nutrients. So if you're able to put some of this in with your soil mix and mix it around in here, and then that way all your plugs get a little bit, or when you transplant, you can always put a little bit in the hole where you transplant, and your plants will take off.
I think we'll have a whole separate conversation on that, but let's start looking at the seedling trays before we run out of time.
Absolutely, thank you. So here I have a variety of different trays. This one here is, I think there's 200 and some odd here. No, this one might be 500. This is a 288. It's kind of shallow. So with these, you're going to have to water more. This is more for if I was doing like a salad mix timeline and I wanted to transplant it, I would use that. Or for me, early in the spring, I'm a bigger scale. I would just fill that. So then I have 288 of something, and then I can pot them up to bigger pots later.
Next, the goal is to start as many seeds as possible, again, depending on the scale, with the least amount of effort.
There you go. That's exactly. And then for this too, I have 288 in there. I know some farmers that will just continually fertilize. So this is a kelp fertilizer with kelp, seaweed fertilizer. I use a special type of kelp. It's Ascophyllum. It has all the essential minerals in it. And this is water soluble. So that means the plants can access it right away. I know farmers that will start in these little plugs and just keep on with the fertility, and they'll just have these little cells will just be absolutely 100% roots. And by continually feeding it, you can get away with leaving it in something like this. After 6 weeks, things get root bound, and then they spiral into this really hard bunched, the roots just turn in on themselves, and then they start to go brown, and it's not good for them. But if you're continually feeding them, then you generally can get away with it. This also, if I have limited lights in the spring, I could do, say, 4 rows of celery and then 4 rows of leeks and onions and whatever, and I can get a lot under my little lights if I'm cramped for space. And then you don't have to heat as big a space as well. Moving along, I think this is 108. These ones are 72s. Generally, the deeper the cell, the more space for your roots, the better your seedling's going to do, and you won't have to pot them up as much. I have these other ones. These are more for trees or things that you're going to plan on keeping in for, say, 8 weeks. It's nice and deep, and the roots will go all the way down to the bottom, providing you're watering. So with this one, you can get black trays like this, and you put it inside there. And then if you have, these ones have holes for drainage. You can get ones that don't have holes. And then you can just keep a little bit of water in the bottom of it, so that if you were, say, to go away for a full day and you don't want things to dry out, you could put water in the bottom. And then there's holes in the bottoms of all these. And then that way you'll keep the bottom of your cell wet, and that makes the roots grow deeper. If you're always watering, over-watering sometimes, your roots will just grow like this deep because the water is always there. But if you have water at the bottom and you starve your plants a little bit, then the roots will grow deeper.
Search for that water and grow down deep and strong. So
That's
Kevin, this has been super informative. We are over our time limit here. So I think we will need to wrap this up for today, and hopefully people will send in questions, comments, and we'll continue this conversation next week and take that deep dive that you're able to provide into some of these topics.
Sure. I apologize. I thought we had an hour, which is why I was going a little deeper, but we can certainly pick up where we left off today next week.
Sounds good. Yep. And Wendy, keep those comments coming from your community as well around what you want to grow. And maybe we'll send some targeted questions to Kevin next week around tomatoes, peppers, other things that the Italian Club wants to grow.
Excellent. This is really helpful. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you once again to Sherry and to Grandmother's Voice for providing this amazing platform for us to get together and collaborate and help each other grow together as a community, both plant-wise and community-wise.
Definitely. And I like that, growing together as community. So wonderful. It was so nice being here with all of you, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.